Drumming grew. When I noticed, again, I've showed you earlier on Four Organs how it's interesting to go from, instead of holding the bottom, releasing the lower notes and keep going higher and higher, because you get to kind of this ambiguous tonal area where you don't know really where you are harmonically. When you get to the top of the marimba, where do you go? Well, you go to the bottom of the glockenspiel, and you begin to move up on that, and finally you reach that area at the top of the keyboard where basically it's almost like, is it pitched or is it noise? I felt obliged to put all these things together. There was a piccolo and whistling to imitate the sound of the glockenspiels. All of this came together, so for the first time, I was doing the normal Western thing. I was having instruments of different kinds playing together. The end of drumming was actually, I didn't even realize at the time, opening the curtain on returning to a lot of common Western practice, which was to shortly follow immediately thereafter. And parenthetically, at that point I felt phasing is enough, basta, you know. I mean, if somebody else wants to do it, fine, but that was the last of the phase pieces.
Reich wanted to liberate himself from the strict structures of his early works, and this he achieved in his 1976 piece, Music for 18 Musicians. It was an artistic and commercial triumph that was played on both classical and rock radio stations.
It no longer had such an audible process on the top. It was no longer perhaps, one or two simple ideas pitched against each other. It was a whole extended musical structure. It's like a rich carpet. It's a much richer, denser, more beautiful sound than he'd ever achieved before.
The idea of Music for 18 Musicians on a musical level was to have a large group of people playing together without a conductor. And this is an idea that I discovered in West African music and also in Balinese music. In African music, there's a master drummer who will play a certain signal, which will mean to the other drummers, get ready, we're going to change. In Balinese music, there are two drummers who will either make the ensemble go faster or slower, and everyone's listening for them. What I did was say, okay, we're going to have one vibe player. Every time you hear him, he's giving you a signal, get, set, and change. So he's literally conducting, in a sense. And then there's another conductor who's the bass clarinet player, who gives what you could call soft edge changes. If we're playing a series of harmonies where the change is sort of like that. In other words, some of the old notes are held over and the new notes are introduced to sort of a crossover. That's done by the bass clarinet just going like this, and everybody knows we're ready to go on to the next chord. Those two guys take over the conductorial role.
he makes a kind of harmonic sandwich by lulling you into a false sense of security. This is what the harmony is. And then suddenly, you know, there's a kind of musical trench that's dug, and the whole thing kind of shifts. And that's absolutely brilliant.
And I would say that for young composers today, it is impossible not to consider the kinds of landscapes that Steve has staked out, this idea of something hovering perhaps in musical space and considering many aspects of itself before it moves on to something else.